We tell ourselves it's because we don't have enough space. And that's only partially true.
There are probably about 5,000 cans in this room.
Even if your home is small, many of us store things we think are or will be valuable, especially when they aren't hazardous. And most people do store gasoline and oil and other petroleum products in their garages, despite the hazards of liquid fuels. Certainly our communities have space somewhere to store solid oil. They just don't think of it that way. Instead, they make huge amounts of useless space available for domestic wastes that they call landfills, and dump everything together with no thought of later recovery. They spend millions lining these spaces to try and prevent groundwater contamination, and they put in capture and flaring technology to keep gases from being released to our atmosphere. It never seems to occur to them that if all the organics were cleaned off the garbage beforehand, there would be no chance of the landfill releasing greenhouse gases, no chance of attracting seagulls and other birds and rats and feral dogs and cats and roaches and flies and other vermin, no chance of smelling and causing odor problems for the community or causing disease. And then, if the plastics were clean, it would be fine to put them in the landfill. After all, they came from underground to begin with when they were oil, and now they're even more safely put back in the ground in this solid form called plastic. But why would you? Why would you throw it away? Probably for an anthropological rather than a technical reason. We throw things away because our tribe sees them as impure, as taboo and unclean. Even when we clean our plastics, seeing them in the trash bin makes our tribe deem them unclean and untouchable. Now, I don't want to mislead you into believing that household garbage isn't or can't be dangerous and untouchable. Annie Lennox gives a sobering account of just how bad much of what we bring home really is in The Story of Stuff, the documentary based on the book in our readings. She writes, quote,
"There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing: toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants. They're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk.
End quote. All this is true. And as a society, we must cease these horrible practices. But as Lennox herself writes immediately after, quote,
"And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted." Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit, because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas. Pollute someone else's land.
End quote. Yeah. What a world. All of this